So this victim of sexual assault, who claims that he was assaulted 9 times, not once, 9 times, over a long period of time, 9 times, against his consent. He meets the senior police officer on Wednesday, and let us assume he is asking the police for protection. Okay, we assume that. Then he goes and he claims he meets with Dato' Sri Anwar on Thursday afternoon and is sexually assaulted against his will. That is his story. Okay, now let's take this story at face value first and see what the complete lack of credibility that it has. After the incident, what does the so-called victim do? Now, what do you expect a victim of sexual assault to do? He will look for help. He will go to the police, or he will go and see a doctor. After all, he has just met a very senior police officer the previous day, probably to ask for protection. He doesn't do anything. He goes nowhere on Thursday. What does he do on Friday? Friday morning he goes to work like normal. Goes to the party office. He was working as a staff in the office of Party Kadilan. He goes to the office like normal, behaves normally, sits normally, stands normally, no problem. Friday evening, 6 o'clock, where does this boy go? He goes and has a meeting with about 15 other young men in Dato' Sri Anwar's house. It's a meeting of a group called the Anwar Ibrahim Club. And there we have a photograph of him serving tea and coffee, which is why sometimes there has been reference to him as the coffee boy. Again, he had no problem sitting down and standing up. No complaints. Then what happens? Suddenly on a Saturday, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he suddenly remembers, oh, I was sodomized on Thursday. He remembers. So what does he do? He goes to the doctor. He goes to a hospital called Hospital Pusrawi in Jalan Tun Razak in Kuala Lumpur. Some of you may know where this is. He goes to see the doctor, Dr. Osman, whose story is in the internet. Some of you may have read the details. Now, what does he tell Dr. Osman? He says, I have pain in my bottom. Something plastic was inserted. Very strange thing, but the doctor wrote all this down. Then the doctor said, okay, I better examine you. So the doctor examined him using a procedure called proctoscopy. Later you can ask Dr. Lee Boon Chai about proctoscopy. Okay? Now, and Dr. Yap as well, they're all medical doctors. Put something inside, check. Okay? Now, what did Dr. Osman? I got his report here, so I'll read to you. Not what I'm saying, what Dr. Osman is saying. The anus was normal. I'm so sorry to bother you about all this, but I have to tell you. Okay. It's quite painful, but it has to be done. There was no injury, no tear, no discharge. Anus was clean and dry and looked normal. Right? This is Dr. Osman's report. After checking with a proctoscope. After the examination is over, this victim says, oh, I was sodomized by Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim. So the doctor says, oh, in that case, now you're telling me that you better go and make a police report, you better go to GH. Now, this is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Now where is GH? GH is 10 minutes across the road. But the victim doesn't end up there in 10 minutes. This chap takes 2.5 hours to reach GH. We don't know why. We will find out later in court. Now in GH, this is another interesting thing. Now he goes to the A&E, the accident and emergency. Now when you go to accident and emergency, what happens? You may be having chest pains, you may be having asthma problems. How long do you wait? You wait 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, right? Who do you see? You see the normal doctor, right? Yes, that is what happens in A&E in every public hospital. We know. That is why some of us don't go to public hospitals. We go to private hospitals and pay people like Dr. Lee a lot of money, right? But for this young man, what happened? 3 specialists are waiting to examine him. 3 specialists. Who are they? Dr. Khairul Nizam, emergency care specialist. Mr. Muhammad Razali Ibrahim, general surgeon. Dr. Siu Shu Feng, forensic pathologist. All waiting. High-powered team to examine the boy. Okay, he gets examined. Later we will find out the details, but we have their report. And the interesting thing, ladies and gentlemen, is the report says exactly the same thing as Dr. Osman's report. In the medical language, I read it to you, it says, no conclusive clinical findings suggestive of penetration to the anus. Same report. Okay. So now we leave the doctors alone, we go back to basic common sense. If there is no penetration, where is the sodomy? Basic. You don't need a law degree, you don't need a medical degree, you don't need to go to university. Very easy to understand.
Common sense.
Common sense. See, everybody can understand this, but the AG of the country cannot understand this. This is the problem. This is why we have to change the AG of the country. You agree? Yes. This is the problem. Now, we also know, ladies and gentlemen, in court, they are going to come and bring so-called DNA evidence and say, because of DNA evidence, we found the DNA there. You know what I mean by there, right? We found the DNA there, therefore you are guilty. That's what they're going to come in court and say. But let's go back to common sense again. What does common sense say? Kalau tak ada masuk, macam mana dia pergi sana? Very basic. If there is no penetration, how did the DNA get there? Basic question. So, for me, and I offer you this answer, the DNA was planted. That is what we will say and show in court. Now, ladies and gentlemen, fabrication of evidence has happened in this case. Is this the first time fabrication of evidence is happening in cases for Dato' Sri Anwar? No. It has been happening from 1998 till now, and we are seeing the same thing happening again. Earlier, when Dr. Yap started his speech, he told about Dr. Mahathir, saying to him and the other backbenchers, Anwar Ibrahim has a black eye. I think it is self-inflicted. That we know was a lie. Dr. Mahathir lied, and I think he knew he was lying. That we know. But the point I'm making now by telling again that story is because the AG of this country today, Tan Sri Gani Patel, who was then a senior prosecutor in the AG's chambers, he fabricated a medical report on the 26th of October 1998 to support Dr. Mahathir's idea that it was self-inflicted. This is the loyal civil servant trying to support the boss, to angkat the boss. The boss says black, we write black in the report. The boss says white, we write white in the report. So the boss said, Anwar Ibrahim punched himself, we write in the report, Anwar Ibrahim punched himself. This is true, this is what we know. At that time, we did not know it. At that time.